Anyway podcast.
Welcome.
Here we are. We have a guest with us today.
Hi, I'm Donny.
Donny!
Donny.
You may have seen him before. He plays a percussion instrument.
One of them, at least.
One of them.
I think
Okay. Is the drum set an instrument or is it like 7 instruments?
Hey, I don't know. The piano might be more than 2 because it's
The piano's kind of one instrument. You can't take half
but
a
it's a
piano
percussion
somewhere.
instrument.
Kind of.
Is every key.
It's the same thing as like a pair of pants, but you only have one pant that you wear at a time. You're
That's
not wearing
true.
You're not wearing 2 pairs of pants. You're wearing one.
I think it's
But
singular.
It's a pant leg.
It's drum set, so like you
Yeah,
got a
it is
singular
one group of drums.
but you can also play them as individuals. Because I mean,
But you
when-
don't say I play the drum. You say I play the drums.
in high school percussion, we were so like stretched thin. Like one kid would play the high tom, and like that was it. And he'd have 2
feel that.
notes, and then he'd just stand there for like 35 measures of rest.
Yeah,
Have you
it
guys
is-
seen
I feel
that reel where they do the
Yeah.
and the kid
Yeah.
like runs up and he's like clap.
Yeah.
That would have been me in
The one.
Being that kid
Yeah.
is so fun, though.
Yeah.
That's been the only thing I can play. Can you play Clear the Chalkboard?
The-
Erasers.
But to be honest,
slap, I think.
that takes more skill, a certain kind of skill that I don't mean to be harsh. I don't know if you have, which is patiently waiting.
Listen, Ryan, I
one
play
moment to do
my
a boring
steering
thing.
wheel percussionally better than anyone I know.
But here's what I'm saying: do you wait for 3 minutes of your 3.5-minute song that you're playing the steering
just
wheel
play
to
one note?
to play one note?
Nah.
It takes some
that's
effort.
that's the skill set.
I put it on mute.
It
And
takes a patient person. I think Katrina could do that.
What if they only handed it to me at that moment?
Maybe.
It's rough because you're expecting a percussionist to wait 35 measures and be patient about it and
Yeah.
like actually be 100% focused on counting the song out as
Yeah.
you go. And they're all like ADHD.
Yeah.
Bro.
Imagine if the way football is turn based.
Yeah,
It's like
they're the
it's like
kicker.
okay, like you're the kicker. Like do you have that skill? Even worse than that though. Imagine like the whole game of football does not stop except for you to wait to get set up to do your thing. Imagine they're all running
And
the
everyone's
whole
looking.
time.
I would be.
That's what it feels
I
like.
would be the kid that's back there on that giant bucket of a drum, and
Yeah.
and like the one moment where it's like a crescendo, and then you have to like break it, and I would just miss my cue completely.
Yeah.
and
I've done that many times.
we had a freshman during our Christmas concert do the exact thing with the big bass drum, like the giant
Yeah.
one. And he'd miss his hit every time, and eventually, like the crowd expected it, and like we're like cackling. they loved him.
And no. Well, this isn't what we're talking about today.
No,
but it is.
no. Great rabbit trail.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So great rabbit trail.
Yeah.
Donnie, we're glad you're here, and we're here. You're here because of your wisdom.
Oh yeah.
Yes,
Like
the grand
Johnny is a
wisdom.
wise sage.
wise sage, and it's on topic with today.
Yes.
We had an awesome discussion on Sunday morning before service, and then we went, man, we wish we would have recorded that for a podcast, and then immediately wait,
We can
we
record
can do
that for a
that
podcast. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So this is that.
this is that. That's how some of these come to be. Is we go, man, that's a conversation worth having. Man, I wish other people could join into that conversation. So some of you're going to hear the topic in just a second, and you're going to click off this video, and you're not interested at all. But I want you to hold that thought if that's going to be your first reaction, because I think some of the things that we're going to talk about may surprise you on how healthy it is to have a good perspective on the concept of video games.
Aren't those things that turn you into a violent monster?
I feel like that
According
was
to
harder
everyone's
to say
parents.
than I like Harry Potter.
It's
Yeah.
too late for me.
Yeah.
So Donnie and I were talking at first on Sunday, and I don't want to completely mimic the conversation, but I think it was a good launching point. That you recently had played kind of a virtual reality game.
Yeah.
And I was like, describe what game this was or what you were doing.
Okay, it's a game. It's essentially a mod for a game. If you want to really get into like specifics.
Oh
but
man, get your nerd on. Go.
Go.
anyways, it's a Star Wars mod for a sword fighting game, and essentially it's just VR Star Wars. Which I don't know if you're like. I mean, yeah, everybody's kind of nerds here, right? Like,
Yeah.
that is the peak gaming experience is to play to have a lightsaber and swing it around. Like I've never wanted anything more since I was 7 than
Yeah.
this, and we've reached it.
And that
Yeah.
was when I was like, I'd played something similar, not the exact version, at like some sort of like GameWorks or something, where they had like a 3D thing where you could sword fight, or you could. My version was like a horror movie where like you were running from zombies and trying to fight them, and it was like a very brutal and very scary like version of like I was like VR's I'm gonna die.
It's
Yeah.
when you put on like the first time you actually play this game, it's just like you start in, you hit like say one wave of like enemies or whatever, and they immediately start attacking you. And every time I have somebody new try it, they like freak out because like I make sure to explain it to them, like, you know, like swing slowly, like remember to turn around with the sticks and everything. But all of a sudden, like animal brain kicks in because you like it tricks you into thinking you're actually being attacked. You start like you get drenched in sweat without doing anything,
Yeah.
and they're like flinging their arms around as fast as they can. And I'm like having a heart attack because I don't want my controllers to break.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
it's weird how into it you get, even if it's clearly like the character models are not that great. They're not
Yeah.
super
Yeah.
realistic, but it's still kind of like you get your adrenaline pumped up and you don't even have to like you don't think that you're actually in danger, but your
so
body
crazy how cool how easily the brain is tricked, but
Yeah.
also how incredibly powerful some of this technology is getting to mimic
It's
some of this stuff. So that's where the launching point of this whole podcast came from. That conversation you had about this game. And so what Ryan and I immediately, I think, identified was like, man, there are so many times that this conversation around video games always seems to either go right or left, in the sense of like, there's a one party on the right that's like anti-video games, melts your mind, like it is not healthy, it leads to destructive habits, it leads to violence.
And additionally, it's a waste of time.
It's a waste of time. And then there's the left side that's like, I have some of my closest friends. Some of my deepest relationships have developed from this. It's something that has great nostalgia that I can do with my kids, that is cheap, fun, that is repeatable and easy, and that has had an incredible part of like a core memory of enjoyment, and even has aspects of community. And most of the time, I find that the only differences between the one or the two is that communal aspect or a lack of even having tried it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I started my history with video games is I played them growing up, and I was like growing up with the Nintendo 64 and the GameCube, and then got an
Preach
Xbox
it.
360 after that. And it's like that's the trajectory we went on.
Yep.
So by late middle school, early high school, it was a ton of shooter games and whatever. And that was in the era, I'd say 10 years ago and before, where online multiplayer stuff was starting to become
Oh, yeah.
super solid and reliable, and you could do that all day, every day. There are a bunch of people doing that, but there's still a lot of leftover people from the days of a story mode or a campaign mode
Yep.
being the main thing that you do in a game, or a create your own world kind of mode.
Yep.
And so that's what I did. I played video games probably 4, 6, 7 hours a day. Summer break, I'd play it even more, and like just absolutely obsessed with it. But it wasn't a friend thing. When a friend came over to play, it was like, okay, what are the few games I have that we could both play?
Yeah.
What are like the low shelf, low tier games I can do
Mario
to appease
Party.
this person?
And Smash
Yeah.
Brothers.
Smash Bros. Yeah,
Smash
that's
Yeah.
what
Brothers.
came to mind.
But in the beginning and on my own, and most of my experience with it was solo. This is a way to avoid community, a way to avoid being social, avoid
Isolation.
and in the same way that any addiction can be that way, just avoid and numb like what's going on in my world, not make me not have to think.
Well, you went the a human nature is you go the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
Go to the easiest thing to get
Yeah.
to the best outcome possible.
So I went the
And
full hermit route.
You went the full hermit, but
Yeah.
you were still getting stimulus that made stimuli that
Yeah.
was making your life seem like it had value
Yeah.
and happiness. And that's the danger, I think, of video games, is that like anything, it can be something that you run to mask or to hide in or to use as a coping mechanism. And you elevate it to a level that it does take over your life, or it starts to cripple your ability to socialize
Yeah.
or have good health,
Yeah. I had a friend of a friend one time say that he was in the military, and he said a military friend of his would not get off his, this sounds like a mom saying this, but his wife was pregnant, and he would not get off his online game. He was like, I have 10 minutes left. And she was like, I'm in labor. Take me to the hospital. He was like, in a minute. And that's like,
oh my
that's
gosh.
like the deep darkness, numbing, suck you in, whatever of video games.
I think that's the side that I think when people think about video games that has been elevated by our culture, that has been elevated
especially the conservative Christian culture.
And I would even say those that don't understand completely what it's about.
Yeah.
Especially because I think a lot has changed in the last 10 years that it once was. When video games started for me, it was like watching a movie. It was just interactive. I knew it had no value. It was just kind of a story. Sega Genesis was my first. Sonic the Hedgehog was the first game I ever played. And even before that, when we didn't even own a system, we could rent it. You could rent the whole system for a weekend. And that's what my dad did. He rented a Super Nintendo, brought it home, and we played it for 2 days. And we did that every so often. And it was like a grand reward, like going to the movies.
Yeah.
But it didn't like suck our whole lives. It was just like a special treat. And so in those moments, my first interactions with video games didn't lead to any negative things. In fact, I would say I played GoldenEye, was like the first community game that I played.
Yeah.
It wasn't very fun to play by yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
You could do speed runs on it and do some of that, but even that was communal because you were competing against your friends to beat the levels. And you would talk about it at school, and it would become something that was an aspect. And then when Halo came out and Halo 2 and 3 started going online, the game became something of, I had a friend that had a garage that we were pulling up with couches back to back with TVs that we left there, and we're playing these games.
LAN parties.
So all hour of the night, LAN parties, exactly. We're running the wires and routers and all this stuff, and some of the best, cheap, safe fun
That's exactly
I
what
had
we
in my
did.
childhood was playing these games and laughing and talking about it. And it was my first experience in a place where I was completely accepted for what I was and liked, and I felt valued. And some of the things I did with my peers were my choice, not what a school set up, not what an adult world had provided, but something that my friends and I set up as a community. And it was awesome. It was an amazing experience. Donny, what was yours like growing up?
Mine growing up, this might be a bit controversial, but Grand Theft Auto Online was I had not played. Okay, see, I was exactly in kind of your boat for the longest time, where it's just I had single player games, and honestly, I still enjoy a good like story driven because
it's the same as reading a fiction book.
Exactly, it's like
not
a
an
book.
escapism. It's like reading a good book. Absolutely.
Yeah, I had a game that I've been playing, and it's not too long, but it's essentially a book. It's like a detective animated novella, but it's got multiple endings, like kind of like a choose your own adventure RPG mechanics. Really, really fun. Really, really well
like a
written.
Fable style game, like Fable 2.
Yeah, kind of. But
trying to connect to the older guys. Go.
Yeah, super character driven. Lots of text, but it's also spoken, voice acted, stuff like that. But till I'd say probably late middle school, I got like an Xbox, and I had a friend that also had an Xbox, and none of my friends really played online games. But once it like clicked, that's all we did. Instead of meeting up, going somewhere, we'd either go to somebody's house, all bring our Xboxes, just play them, or we were at home playing our Xboxes together. And I think that's kind of like the weird like thing that it kind of consumes you, but we were at a point where it wasn't really consuming our whole life. Like we still did stuff, but it was like, when you sit down and watch TV after a long day, like it's essentially kind of the same thing, but I can't put my finger on how it's different. There's still community behind.
There's still community behind it, but I think what you're saying is like, all right, if I go home and I sit next to my wife and we watch a sitcom and we laugh at the jokes and we interact a little bit and we say like other episodes or other characters or, oh man, they're so funny. That's very different than if you come back and you both get on your phones and you don't talk to each other and you're watching your own thing. You know what I mean? Like there's still like a aspect of it that is
it's
similar.
A shared medium.
It's a shared thing. But when you're playing together and your characters are interacting and stuff, it can be. But if that's all you do as a couple,
That's
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't go like, oh man, that's healthy.
Yeah.
We're doing great. No issues here.
I think I want to
Yeah.
bring up well, you were talking about it earlier, and I wanted to say something, but it's weird how normalized using, because you mentioned coping with it
Yeah.
and using it as a coping mechanism versus like a healthy coping mechanism, and I hadn't really heard that like actually stated and set out before, that it's not really a healthy coping mechanism to play a video game for hours, like
Yeah.
hours and hours on end. Like you'll see people talking about it, like especially in like the more like tighter knit, smaller gaming communities, and just generally their gaming culture, if I can say that.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
that's kind of a weird thing to say, but
Well, Twitch and some of those even platforms that have these communities that you're talking about, or Reddit.
they spout like how actually like how it's a good thing to use it as a coping mechanism, and I think it's really not. Like,
No.
No.
especially like
not in the ways that they World of Warcraft was the game that really got my attention to how destructive games can
exactly.
be.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And if you're not aware of what World of Warcraft was, it was the most popular RPG game of all time, right?
RPG, for those older folks out there, means role-playing game.
Yeah,
You have a character and they grow and develop over time.
Well, if we're gonna get technical, it's an MMORPG.
Yes.
That's
which
true.
is very different.
Massive multiplayer online.
Yes, so it was an RPG game that had the first online community that interacted not only with characters and stories, but with equipment and your inventory.
Oh yeah.
And so items and different things would fall from different challenges. And so what it played off of was actually, it was random what you would get from the loot pool from these people that you would destroy. I know this is like extremely nerdy. It's on my voicemail that I am a gamer. I do not hide this. But what ended up happening is, in that game, unbeknownst to most of the players, is that they were using a tactic that casinos use.
Yeah.
In order to get you to stick in the game. They were using a tactic that almost winning is actually more addicting than winning.
Mm-hmm.
So almost winning is actually neurologically more powerful. You get more excited about the almost win than winning. And so in these games, beating the guy, doing the whole thing, and then having this loot jump out that could be, ended up being the thing that would use. So people are spending 16, 17 hours a day playing this game, mining these items, selling it. This is where you had that kind of stereotype pop up of like the guy that's like surrounded by pizza boxes and energy
his
drinks
basement.
in his basement.
The only light is his computer screen, which is so blue.
Yes.
I've got a friend. The modern equivalent of that is called a looter shooter, which is essentially Halo. It's Halo, but with that kind of loot pop out, you might get the item you're looking for. I have a friend. I'm not going to specify this friend, but in a specific looter shooter, they had over, like, I'm not kidding, 20,000 hours just playing this game from middle school all the way up to like maybe just a couple years after we graduated till they stopped, of just playing that game. And the goal is to try and get an item. But every time like you get the item, it's a kind of a now what situation.
Yeah.
And so they just kept on releasing new items to get, and ridiculous amounts of playtime you actually have to do to get that item. And it wasn't fun. Like we tried playing with him. Like he said it was amazing, but it was never fun because it was just the same thing over and over again. It was like they were almost like a zombie. Like they just kind of you compared it to casino tactics.
Yeah.
And it's, I hate to sound crass here, but like with the penny slot people, like they'll put a nickel in and they're just kind of in a trance.
It's exactly what it
it's
is.
the exact same thing.
It's that for the almost win, the addictiveness of that, and also for people who Sharon and I were talking about this last night, and she looked up, like she Googled why are video games good and like why people said they were good, and the stuff it gave, a lot of the reasons it gave were super synthetic. It helps give you a sense of control if your life doesn't have a sense of control.
Accomplishment.
And a sense of accomplishment, both of those things. If your life feels out of control and you feel like a washed up loser, like your life isn't going where you wanted, you aren't achieving what you hoped, video games will give you that feeling.
Yeah.
And the moment you're done with the game, you walk out into the real world and realize you don't actually have accomplishments to take with you. Like you don't have a degree you can put on the wall. You don't have a Medal of Honor. You don't have a whatever.
Yeah.
It's all these synthetic ways to help us cope with a lack of those things in our lives. Again, that is like the function of some games, and especially heavy on playing games isolated, even if it's multiplayer.
Yeah.
Playing games isolated without relationships behind them. There's a difference between the 30, 40-year-old guy who stays at a laser tag place every day, and there's all these little kid birthday parties and whatever, and he's there just trying to be the best he can be without anybody. There's a difference between that and the little kid birthday parties.
Yeah.
They don't care that they are terrible.
Yep.
They just love running around and seeing their friends and screaming and running the other way.
Absolutely.
And like the shoulder-to-shoulder interaction is way better than the like, I'm actually going to get really good at this.
So there's two things that I want to say. There's something about one of the statements I have about college. They say all the time, it's not what college teaches you, it's about what college teaches you your limits. College teaches you your limits more than it teaches you information these days. The information is everywhere. You can get it almost anywhere. You can read the books. You can go to the library. You can go to YouTube. There's a lot of things, but teaches you what you're capable of and dissects it. But it also provides community.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you take an online course and you don't ever have to do the assignments and you just listen to the lectures, you're missing out.
Mm-hmm.
You're not getting the same education as someone that learns in the classroom or learns in a community and then also does the work. So for me, video games do two things. One, it taught me that if I put time into something, I could get better and that I improved. Now, that skill didn't transfer to anything, much like soccer doesn't when you get out of the real world.
Yeah.
Like, wow, I'm really good at kicking this shoe across the room now. But it taught me I could get better at something. And at the time, it made me more physically capable.
Yeah.
But it's not like that skill lasts forever. It dwindles. And then the second thing it taught me is to operate in teams and to work together and to communicate and to work through conflict and to create strategy and to listen to others that have different opinions or different thoughts. Those are all social things that come from obviously more accepted routes than some others. Mm-hmm. Now, what I've learned about video games is much like any other entertainment content. You have to be selective about what you think video games are healthy, which ones you think are healthy versus which ones are not. And also be very aware of what emotional state you are in.
Oh, yeah.
And I think you have to be aware of like, wow, I'm going through some really hard times right now. It probably wouldn't be very good for me to bury myself in my basement and do nothing else and not talk to anyone and not,
I've been there.
But that would be no difference for me than someone going home and Netflixing for 3 hours and not doing anything but looking at reels or TikToks and then going to bed. In my mind, I'm going like, that's very similar to a guy that just goes into his basement and plays video games for 3 hours.
Everything somebody complains about with like, oh, it doesn't lead to real achievement. It's a waste of time, whatever. Like, it's the same. I was talking to Sharon about this too. It's the same as watching TV in general. Like maybe documentaries, and you actually gain real world knowledge to take with you. But like most TV, most YouTube and movies and reels and all this other stuff, even technically fiction books, like it's not really helping you in any real world way. It's just a way to pass time. It's just a way to whatever. Mm-hmm. That's not necessarily bad.
No,
but you can't live off of that.
No, it's not. It's whipped cream. It's not sustainable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The thing that changed for me, and we're going to get to some of the places where we think video games are going, which is also a really healthy conversation because what we've seen in the last 5 to 6 years has really changed the trajectory of where I think video games are going. I don't think we've seen the ceiling at all on what this market or what this is going to be like over the next 10 to 15 years. But what happened 5 to 6 years ago, if you're not aware, if you're not in the gaming world, is this game called Fortnite came out. It came out about 5 years ago. Now, when Fortnite came out, it is still a kid's game. I mean, like 8 to 12 years old is probably the average player of the game. But there's players like me that still enjoy it and a lot of boomers as well. But what happened in that game, because of its popularity on all of these platforms that have online communities, they were able to merge the PlayStation, Xbox, and personal computer, PCs, personal computers into one giant community.
It used to be to where if you had an Xbox and your friend had a PlayStation and you had the same game, you couldn't play online together.
We couldn't do it. We had a friend that was almost like excluded completely from the friend group after we got into video games. Not like we did it on purpose because we didn't like it, but he had a PlayStation and Sorry.
You're out.
It really was that
Yeah.
bad, and we were in the 4th generation of Xbox
yeah.
and PS4s. Without that,
Mhm.
we had a decade of those consoles without being able to play together. And PC people were on their high horse over here, shouting down at both of us
Yeah.
for our noobness.
Yeah.
All right. And so what happened in this moment is it felt like if you were in a city and you had a fence, but you knew there was another city right across the river that had a fence. It was like the gates opened
Mhm.
and everybody could just suddenly go everywhere and talk to anyone. And it was weird because what immediately happened is I had a friend in California and a brother in New York City that I immediately could play a game with that I couldn't a day ago
Yeah.
when it happened.
Yeah.
And it immediately created almost like this bridge for relationships, and it connected. And you know what made me want to play more?
Mhm.
Not just the game, it was who I was playing with. And that was totally like a nostalgia feel.
Mhm.
It was like pulling me back to my high school, but it also was reconnecting me with people I hadn't talked to in years.
That's exactly the point. Like, I kind of like over the past probably year,
Mhm.
getting really into like my degree in college and when I started to play here, I guess.
Mhm.
I started like kind of like weaning myself off games, and then I like about like 3, maybe 4, maybe in half a year ago, I hit this wall. I was like, I don't really like these aren't really fun anymore. I'm not really having a good time. I'm here because I'm talking to my friends
Mhm.
on the computer, and at points I'm like, I'm winding down. I'm going to bed. I'll spend just an hour because usually 4 of them will be on doing something, and I'll just talk to them. I won't even play a game. I'll just be talking, and it's like
Mhm.
that sense of community, like you said, that like that bond. Because you just want to be with your friends, at a point. Like Fortnite's fun and all, but like you play 30 minutes alone, it's like,
It's not as fun.
yeah, now
Yeah.
what?
No, I
But-
don't play him at all alone.
But
like at all.
I'm playing
Hardly at
with
all.
my friend. I'm playing with Jesse.
Yeah.
I'm having a great time because we're joking around. We're just enjoying, some
Yeah.
kind of shared medium where like the bond between us is more fun than the actual medium itself.
And that's why when I was getting married, my roommate in college was my best man, so he planned my bachelor party and whatever. And we're all Bible college minister wannabes, so like we're not doing crazy stuff. What we did, I'm trying to think back. What we did was an escape room, and then went to Applebee's, and I think that was it. I think that was literally it. But my bachelor party was people I enjoyed, people I liked hanging out with.
Yeah.
So it felt like these experiences you're talking about. We got together and like it was more about commenting on what we were doing than it
actually-
was about doing it. We're literally these Bible college students in this escape room, and one of the things like you can find the clues somewhere, but it's like name the 10 plagues, which is Exodus, the Bible,
Well, yep.
and we were all like, I don't know, and start googling it, like just like how funny that was, and we like it just kept us going, give us stuff to talk about, and then we went to Applebee's and we went back to the hotel room and played Super Smash Bros. That is the every Bible college
It is.
students.
that's
I've bachelor
experienced
party.
that.
But then, so I learned from that, and I was like, that's what makes this fun because you like the group of people. If you're the
Yeah.
groom or whatever, you like the people you chose to be with. So then I got to be his best man at his wedding in Sacramento. And what I did instead of an escape room was an Indiana Jones themed cooking class.
Oh my
If that isn't something to comment about for 3 hours, I don't know what is. And then laser tag, and then dinner, because it was dinner. Yeah, no, yeah. So no dinner. Okay. Anyway, both of those, and they just like quietly had Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark playing in the background as they showed you how to make tzatziki sauce and whatever. And I was like, okay, sure. Whatever.
Oh, you
Monkey
didn't make
brains.
chilled monkey brains?
No. But we did like make everybody aprons, like matching black aprons with the Indiana Jones theme font, but where they're from and what their name is. So if Indiana Jones was St. Louis Dufault
Yep.
and Indiana something or whatever, Nebraska Josh, and it was great.
Nebraska.
So great.
Josh.
what I love about this discussion and why I think I have a little bit of a visceral reaction when people poo-poo on video games and go full Karen or Kevin. And it's not that I don't think you can have kind of a negative perspective from an experience that costs you a lot. Like, it's not that I don't think there are those options, but I think it'd be like a kid that like got bullied for playing a sport and had like a terrible experience and like never really understood it, never really liked it, and now they just hate baseball. And it's the worst game ever. And I'm like, you're right. Like, it's the worst. It's boring. And like, I just think people make deep assumptions off of, these stereotypes that have been placed out there, and they miss that there is a deeper thing that's happening inside of communities. And even over the last 2 years during the pandemic, some of my best conversations happened in the middle of a video game that were spiritual, that were healthy, that were real, that were confessional, that were growth. And, I don't know where else in my life that naturally intercedes without great intentionality. And this is a routine way that community is just, integrated into my life in a healthy way. And so obviously you always got to reevaluate and make sure that you're in a healthy place and take breaks if you think that maybe you're not. And I don't think there's any area that you shouldn't be doing that in, let alone video games.
Yeah. It's video games aren't the thing you need, but they can they can provide a medium for things you need, like community. But it's just like, I think I've said this maybe once or twice on the podcast already, but Dallas Willard, a famous pastor, was at a pastor's conference, and they asked him, or he asked everybody, if a study came out that said using hot pink offering envelopes raised your offering intake by 25%, would you use them? And some people were like, absolutely, I'd use them. I wouldn't want to stop God from whatever, blah, 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 blah. And other people were like, absolutely not. You're trusting. And so they asked him finally, and they're like, what do you think? And he was like, oh, I would use them. I just wouldn't trust them. And that's where I think I failed as a high schooler, is I like trusted in them. They were my crutch. They were my absolute everything when I didn't understand why my high school girlfriend broke up with me. And when I couldn't, like, I didn't know how to say or express my emotions, I'd be like, well, video games make me feel good, so let's go do that. And
and there's just a difference between coping and finding pleasure and enjoyment in them separate from pain or loneliness or heartache. And it's very similar. Like, if you go to a movie hoping that it's going to just make you escape for 2 hours because your life is so terrible, versus you go to a movie enjoying it and excited, we would look at it and go, dude, don't go to the movie if you're depressed. Like, go have a conversation. Like, go talk to somebody. Like, be with people. Don't isolate. I think video games can be that way if we let it be. But I also think we need space to recognize that this has a place in communal circles that have deep things. And I know I keep repeating myself, but I want people to recognize that if you have kids or teenagers that are enjoying video games, encouraging them to create community inside those games and choosing games that they can play with others, and then even monitoring what communities they're attaching to, because it's not a positive community and it's a negative community, that can have negative effects too.
There's just rough places.
Yes, and there's some bad things, and just like a bad group of friends they hang out with at school, you need to make sure that there's deep impact, negative or positive, in these. So
I think looking at it less as just I don't know, some nerd in his basement playing a game, like especially from like I guess a parental point of view, you got to really consider that as just another community that they're interacting with. Yeah. Almost the same aspect as social media. Like, you're worried, like, say at school they're getting into a bad crowd, but a lot of parents don't know like how bad of a crowd some kid is getting into online. Like, there is some serious, like, just awful like groups of people on there, and they will just
absolutely. And it's all and educating yourself and understanding the games your kids are playing and how they operate are really, really, really important. A game like Fortnite, you can randomly link up with people and talk, and it's random cues are crazy. Where a game like Rocket League, there's no voice chat, so like you can play and you can chat a little bit, but they can't physically talk to you. And so knowing the difference between certain games is really important. Call of Duty, not only is maybe the warfare side of it would be a little difficult for younger kids, but they have community, conversations in that can go really, really harsh and bad, and it has nothing to do with the content in the game and everything to do with the community that you're attaching to. Exactly. So You know, again, those are all things though, that decisions that if you're talking about kids, I think video games become just like content of a movie, and you need to know not just the content that's in the game, but you need to know the message that potentially is coming through the voice chat. So don't let your kids have voice chat or microphones unless you know who they're talking to, because it's just not a healthy thing.
Yeah.
Now, when you're an adult, you can make healthy choices and connect with the people you want to, and I think you can choose that. But as children, I think you have to, especially with my kids, they have like N64, you know, like they're on Super Nintendo.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, I'm letting them play together and create community, and they're cheering each other on because we only have one gaming set, so they have to share or cheer each other on, and it makes it the same thing. I'm trying to give them the same experiences I had to kind of build up their expectations and understandings that it's not a coping mechanism. It's a fun thing to do, but it's not the
I want to come back around to VR, because this is kind of where our conversation started and grew the most, and then we kind of backtracked into our history and our whatever. VR is, if you don't know, if you're an old person, I say that with love because I feel like I'm an old person. What I didn't say about all my video game experience was that I played a ton in middle school and high school, but I was the youngest of two, and so I never had to get the console. I just got the games. Well, none of the consoles were mine. So I went to college and had to cut cold turkey. And for me and my addictive personality and my tendency to isolate, honestly, that was incredible. Just like having nothing to do. So I had to go. It's Bible college, so people are pretty safe. So I just had to go hang out with random people. We're all going to Taco Bell. Do you have $2? Then you can come and whatever. It was great. And it was good for me. But how was I going to tie that into VR? But VR is different.
Your gaming history had an end.
Yeah.
Been playing
so that's why I'm explaining what VR is. If you're like me, and you're
out of the
you're
community,
spiritually an old person or something. I don't know.
Spiritually,
VR is a headset video gaming kind of thing. It's no TV, it's no phone, it's no other screen. But it's a headset that you put on, and then you are animating your character into the game with your body, not with a controller. So you usually have a headset, and then I think 2 handheld controllers.
Typically, you can play without.
And that's like the same way that CGI works and like motion tracking with like
and they have
the Hobbit and stuff.
New stuff that's really cool. And virtual reality stuff has really just started to take off in the last like 2 years, but it's been out for a while. It's been out for probably 10 years, maybe even 7 or 8.
Maybe a little longer.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm trying to think when the first Oculus. So Google,
I know some stuff came out in like 2015.
2011.
Okay. 2011 was when you could really catch videos.
When it got popular was when Google started sending out these cardboard headsets. To where you could actually use your phone as a VR headset, and you could put it into this free or very cheap cardboard setup and set your phone into it, and then you could actually use it to walk through a YouTube video that had VR set up. You could walk on a hiking trail. You could do all this stuff. Now, of course, that's all the positive side of VR, but there's kind of a nasty side that a lot of people know and some may not that kind of get into VR. But the major funding for virtual reality is coming from the porn industry. And they see the immense potential. And of course, you don't have to dig very far to know the statistics about how much revenue is in pornography is mind blowing. It's like take every major sport in the United States, professional basketball, baseball, football, and combine it, and it's still not even close to what porn provides. So they see this as the future. Now, what's crazy is because porn is king and it makes so much money, normally they see the next level of entertainment before everyone else because they have an invested interest. And so although porn right now is at the head of kind of making this want to happen, I think what you're going to see is the VR games are going to become more popular.
Oh, yeah.
So imagine this communal aspect we're talking about, but now you're actually basically FaceTiming in rather than making the phone call that has been video games. And you are now face-to-face in an animated character that you now can create your character to look how you would ideally look and what you would ideally be like. And you can do what? Play paintball? Hike Everest?
Yeah.
Go crazy. I mean, I even read about this new technology that they are creating kind of a silk clothing with neuron kind of like synthetic electricity that they can simulate anything from water to heat, to like swimming or like sand.
The more advanced haptic sensors.
It's crazy stuff. And so you have a full body suit on, and then it tracks your movement. And so you're in a room or you're in a place that can basically track, and then you have a little treadmill. Anyway, so the thought process of this, over the next 10 years, we're going to see video games go to a place where the questions now become like, what is that going to look like? I feel like the old man talking about it. 'Cause I'm like, that scares the snot out of me.
Yeah, it scares me a lot because I remember when I was a kid and playing a lot of shooter games, and everybody's parents, when they started, were like really freaked out about it. And that was fine. I remember telling my mom, it's only rated M for violence.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, like, violence is illegal.
Yeah.
Like it's not like, oh, it's just violence. It's just
violence.
gore.
That's
Get over it. Everybody blows up in a red cloud or whatever.
I remember
like,
that same conversation.
They were worried about it. And then what happened? Like, our world with video games and social media got more depressed, had more mental health issues. And yet, it wasn't more violent in general. Violent crime, despite what most modern news media outlets say, has gone down over I think the last at least 50, 60. You would know more about
actually, it's it says 50, 60 years since the 70s. It's actually dropped dramatically, but a majority of that has happened in the last 15 years.
Yeah. So for the prevalence of school shootings and other things that are rough and way more public, the actual level of violent crime has dropped. And what I see when I compare that fear and the video games that they were afraid of and the statistics now is, what is it training you to do? It's training you to sit down and press a button to do an action.
Yeah.
And maybe do that really well. But it's not training you for anything.
Yep.
And I know I can easily go overboard with this. But like your sword fighting game and other games, like, you're not acting out in Call of Duty on an Xbox. You're not acting out shooting somebody. You are pressing a button that looks like a trigger, but you're not standing aiming.
Yeah.
You're sitting on your couch, you're sitting wherever. And some of these VR games might be closer to training you. But let me clarify it this way, that your physical health and emotional health and spiritual health and all those things are all closely tied together, mental health. And as one gets better, the others get better. And so what your body is doing throughout your day is affecting all of those other areas of your health, is like becoming muscle memory that is actually in your mental area, in your mental headspace, that is like numbing you to those movements and making those, because muscle memory is so like you don't have to think about it.
Subconscious.
But like having to force yourself into a position you haven't been in before or do something you haven't done before is different. And it's training you for some of these different actions to do things on a totally muscle memory level basis.
Oh, yeah.
You're not thinking about it.
And I mean, I'm curious, Donny, like when you hear about the VR stuff, like what comes into your mind? Like, what are you thinking about over the next 10 years? Are you excited about some stuff? Are you nervous about any of it?
Honestly, frankly, the technology and what you talked about, the skin haptic sensors, that stuff is frankly insane. Like, it's mind-boggling that you actually be able to like touch and feel something either warm or cold or something. That's an extreme technological advancement. But what I think is what's really advancing, like what's the most popular thing in VR right now isn't a game. And it's out of the games, it's not really a game. The best, most downloaded game is called VR Chat, and in it, you sit around. You get yourself some downloaded avatar. People make themselves look like something silly. Like one of the most popular videos is a guy talking about his experiences in the Iraq War and him getting into a bombing, and his avatar is Winnie the Pooh. Like, it's just him talking about it. And it's really it's such a somber and depressing thing. But like what most people do in VR is just talk to people. And what I think the reason for that is specifically is, well, one, it's free. Two, it's that sense of community. Because I talked about earlier how I enjoy talking with my friends more than actually playing the game. I do like playing the game, but I talk with my friends, and that's more fun. And actually being able to show mannerisms and discuss stuff with actual fluid body tracking and like even facial recognition on certain systems, like speak to each other, and it's just people talking. And as well as I think one of the benefits of VR gaming in the gaming world as a whole is you can't game on VR for 10 hours straight. It's exhausting. You get about 2 hours in, and I think that's why VR chat is one of the more popular ones because
it's not so demanding.
you can sit.
Yeah. See, that's the thing that actually excites me about the VR stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that my brother and I could jump on it. He lives in New York, I live here, and we could go on a hike together. And like we could legitimately go somewhere really cool like the
Exactly.
Everglades.
Oh yeah.
And just go through the Everglades together and like check out a bunch of stuff. And even though it's made up, it would be a shared experience. When you go to Disneyland right now, you go into VR type rides.
Oh, yeah.
Where they take you through these immense, obviously mechanical and like sensory things. But I think there's a piece of it that I think will be quality and redeemable and all that. There's just this part of me that worries that it I know Ready Player One came out a few years ago, and some of you have seen it or not seen it. Have you seen the movie? You haven't?
I haven't quite.
Ready Player One has this kind of like a Matrix style world where you jump in and you are who you are, want to be, and there's loot and items that you're trying to collect, and the money you make in that game, then you can buy a better house that you live at, kind of like The Sims.
Oh, yeah.
And then you can date or do anything you want, and so it becomes a way to escape that we've never seen before. Where, if I can really be crazy, you could almost go there and that's the city square now. It's no longer a physical city square. It's a digital, like everybody is so connected through this digital space that it's a whole nother way to live. I don't know, for a lot of people, that's like terrifying. You're like, oh my gosh, we're not going to have any more cities and like, we're not going to do it anymore. But like, to me, it's just another adaptation that the human race has made to try to fix themselves by creating another world that they can escape to where they are perfect and where things go the way they want and they look the way they want and they feel the way they want and they have control over things that they can't control in the real world. And to me, it's just a cry for help. It's not a cry for help in the sense of like, oh my gosh, every person that plays VR and goes into those chat rooms is depressed and broken. It's more of a like, there is something at the center of each of us that longs to be known and longs to know others. And that exists both in the digital world and in the real world.
Yeah.
And to pretend like that this isn't a reactionary thing to that at the center of it, I think that even that's the most popular game tells me that people don't know, or they may know, but that's what they're longing for.
Yeah.
They're longing for that deep connection. The fun thing about those types of places, like I said, if it's a healthy thing, I could see digital churches popping up.
And that's something that's
exactly.
been starting. One VR location, I literally know nothing about this, so correct me if I'm wrong. One VR location has been the Facebook metaverse or whatever it's really called. There's a real name for it, and that's not
metaverse is less of a VR concept, but more of a separate net concept as a whole.
Okay.
And I mean, at the risk of sounding political here, it's a private net and essentially a thing that Facebook wants to set up so they can, bypass certain laws and regulations. Because remember that whole controversy, Zuckerberg was in the Congress looking for stuff. It's more of a reason to bypass that.
It's like setting up a separate internet almost.
Yeah.
Like it's like setting up blacknet stuff.
There's concepts like that.
What I've heard is
fiction.
like some bigger churches, I don't have a strict list anywhere, but some bigger churches are like, we're launching a new campus and we hired a pastor for it. It's Hillsong Meta or whatever. And it's like literally this like online virtual reality church that they literally hired a person. I don't know if Hillsong did that. I'm not claiming they did. But like they're treating it like it's going to be a real good space. And this is kind of the conversation, especially since the pandemic, people have had with even streaming church, live streaming like we do. We
Absolutely.
have for sure since March of 2020, but some bigger churches have hired an online campus pastor where their big job is to be in the chat, to talk to people during the service who maybe they're in their 70s and they're shut in and they're immunocompromised, so they're not going to church, or maybe they have they're bedridden for some other reason. Maybe they have some physical deformity, maybe whatever. But it's like, oh, this is a new place we can have church. And I think what you have to realize, and at least claim right now, and it would take some incredible feat of technology to say that it would ever be better.
No
We
way.
have to claim right now is what you said earlier. It's a substitute that is clearly not the real thing. We've talked before about communion in our services, how we love it in person, but how online it would be hard to do it well, and we're kind of okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
That way, you feel we want you if you're shut in and if you're stuck at home to feel like you're a part of our group.
Yeah.
To feel like you're as much, but like we don't have to tell you that this isn't the real thing and that you're missing out.
Yep.
And so for everybody else, like, yes, this is worse than our actual services. When communion time comes up, you just see a slide and no camera shot,
Yep.
and you just hear people bustling
Muffling
around.
around.
And yeah,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You're
Go
good.
ahead, Don.
I think that's actually like kind of looking at the reverse opposite of that. I think it can act as almost a stepping stone into actually accessing into the actual physical church. Because I mean, they have those, let's say the VR, like VR Sundays, like Sunday
Yeah.
service in VR.
like a VR campus.
I think
Yeah.
VR is acting as almost a more accessible medium to someone who's like seriously uncomfortable leaving the house in like a bad place in their life, stuck in their basement. But hey, like, I mean, they talk with people in VR and VR chat. Why not go to church on Sunday? And then they can eventually be led to actually coming out, having real
Yeah.
conversations. And
I
real
agree
life
with that.
people.
And we've seen that with live stream too, where over the past year or so since I've been here,
Yeah.
a lot of the new people who have shown up, we've asked them like, "Hey, how'd you find our church?" Whatever, and they'll say, "We checked out your live stream a couple times, and it was easier to watch than this or that church, or it made us feel the same as this or that past experience and whatever in a different place." And then we decided, yeah, we'll show up to your church. So it's good for that. It's good as a halfway substitute for people who can't be there.
Here's the thing I'll say, and this is the easiest segue from what you're saying and what you said, Donnie. The easiest segue I have is that Jesus would be in the VR chat.
Yeah.
Like, and people would be mad about it. Be like, why are you spending time in this virtual world with people that don't even look real, that are silly, that in this toxic place that has the potential to be completely negative? Why would you go there? And he would say, I go to where the people that are sick are at. Go to the places where people are hurting and where they need. And there are people in those places that we know need help. And so I'm not trying to undermine video games completely, but I'm trying to tell you, like, if this place is set up in a way where it's a second life, quote The Office,
Yeah.
and it's their place of retreat, and it's a deep place of depression and hardship, and it has become that negative side of video games that we've talked about. There's a place in there that Jesus would go and pull. But the thing about when Jesus does this, even in the New Testament, he doesn't go to the bars and the parties and tell people to stay there. He tells them to follow him out. And he pulls them out of those places and into community. And the only time he goes back into those places is he brings community with him, and he changes the places that he's at. So, I think if I'm going to tell you to do something with video games, I'm going to tell you who you're playing with and why you're playing are two very important questions
For sure.
to evaluate whether or not video games is an important or should be a part of your life. But I think if you have those questions in a good place, and you recognize that there's potential, just like anything, to go overboard, I think video games can be an incredible way to create community, and to really just enjoy a gift that we have in technology, and an incredible way to engage some parts of the world that are digital but are very cool.
Yeah,
So,
entertainment and enjoyment aren't sinful
Yeah, they
in
are.
themselves. But just like, I think it's 2 Corinthians, but I'm not going to get this right. Just like Paul calls us to, we need to take every thought captive to Christ. This isn't a thing that we have to let consume our lives or abstain totally from. These are things that like let Christ interact with it, and just like the moon, plant his flag in it and say, this is mine now.
Yep.
And this is what I deem redeemable, and this is what I think should be avoided. And like however that journey works for you. Yeah.
I mean, I just think of it as, and I know, Donny, I want to get your thoughts, but I think of it like when Paul shows up to Mars Hill.
Yeah.
And he's just like, he goes straight to their like place of discussion, even though half of the views and the things they're doing and the Hellenistic thinking is not ideal for Christianity. He figures a way to interact with them in a way that comes across. And I think Jesus isn't afraid of video games. He's not afraid of VR. He's not looking down on it going, man, that's inherently sinful. He's seeing the people behind the controllers. He's seeing the people behind the headsets. He's recognizing their hearts and their stories, and he wants them. That's what he wants. And he's going to use any medium that he wants to get them. And I think we should be afraid. Greg Rochelle has a great quote. I will do anything short of sin to save someone. And I believe that is the heart of Jesus. It's just the heart of Jesus. He'll do anything short of sin to save somebody. And so I hope this has been a helpful discussion. It's been a little longer than normal episodes. We had a lot to get through. The potential, I think, for comments is large. Or discussions. Let us know what your thoughts on video games are. If you have some history, what was your first game that you played? I would love to know that.
Have they been a positive influence in your life, or a negative, or a neutral, or a numbing, or whatever?
Are they still an influence?
Yeah,
are they still an influence?
Is there anything we missed, or is there aspects of this that we're not thinking through, or maybe we need to reevaluate? So I really appreciate if you have spent this entire time listening and you've made it this far. Gold star for you.
We are impressed.
Also, nerd. You're smarter.
Sorry, we're not saying that in the camera. We're saying that into the mirror.
Yeah, right.
Takes one to know.
Bunch of nerds talking about games.
Well, if you found this helpful, or you found this to be engaging, and you think that would be something worth sharing, please give us a good rating on all these podcast apps. And if you are on YouTube, hit the subscribe button for more. So till then, have a great, glorious day in the Lord. We'll see you guys later.
See ya.